Today we're diving into a game-changing announcement from the Department of Veteran Affairs that could significantly impact how veterans buy homes. So if you're a veteran or a real estate agent who assists veterans, you won't want to miss this episode. So stick around and find out how this new rule can keep you competitive in the housing market and what it means for your next home purchase. Hi, I'm Joe Harris and I'm here with my buddy Nick Morgan. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing great, Joe. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to be talking about this.
Yeah.
This is based on a lawsuit that I think has been around since 2019. And it's just to give you a brief overview. If you want to know more about the lawsuit, just go research it online. But the lawsuit is Moehlr. It's MOEHLR. So Moehlr. I say that wrong. But
Okay.
Versus NAR. Okay, NAR is a National Association of Realtors.
Right.
It's not one person versus that entity. It's actually a class action lawsuit against a whole bunch of different entities. It's just been wrapped up and framed as Moehlr versus NAR. Okay, so in this lawsuit, the class action alleged that the plaintiffs, which were many of the biggest real estate companies in this country. I'm not going to start naming names, but there's a whole bunch of them that represent lots of agents. I mean, a lot of agents.
Okay.
And they're saying that there wasn't a choice given to the sellers. I'm going to get this wrong, so please do your own research. But that basically it's going to change how real estate is done. And one of the biggest ways it's going to change is through a buyer's, paying the buyer's agent a commission. You see, what was alleged in the lawsuit is that the seller didn't really have a choice and they had to pay the buyer's agent commission.
Okay.
Right? Now, I don't necessarily agree or disagree with that statement, and that's probably not the entire deal. But the reality is that the outcome is that now we're paying a lot of attention to commissions and who and how they get paid.
Okay. Yeah. So like you said, the details and all the outcomes of that lawsuit, you can go ahead and read about that. But specifically, we're going to be talking about how the VA is reacting to the outcome of that lawsuit and what they're doing, changes moving forward for the veterans. Yeah. And so if we want to get right into it, to get started, what is this new VA rule that we're going to be talking about today, and where can people find it?
All right. Well, so for the first thing I didn't mention that beginning is one of the things that came out of this is in a lot of areas you can't advertise, the list agent can't advertise what they're going to pay to a buyer's agent. And they don't necessarily have to offer a commission to the buyer's agent. So the buyer's agent typically would look through the listings on the MLS and they'd see all these houses. They'd find houses for the borrower, that the buyer that might fit their criterion and say, hey, here's a bunch of houses to go look at. And they didn't have to worry about how they're getting paid because on the MLS it said, hey, this is a 2.5% towards the buyer's agent, or 3% or 2% or 1% or whatever it is, right? Depending on the area, the cost, and all these things. And so now the buyer's agent, they're working with a buyer and they're going to show property. They don't know if they're going to get paid on it by the seller or not. So they could negotiate that with the seller, or they can negotiate with the buyer to pay the real estate commissions. In the years past, the buyer's agents always said, hey, look, the seller's paying the commission, which is true directly, but indirectly, we all know that that's just baked into the purchase price.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Cool.
So to go back to your question, the VA has, they have a rule in the past that says that the veteran buyer can't pay the buyer's agent commissions or the broker, co-broke on the property.
Yeah, exactly.
So this kind of put veterans at risk of not being able to have good representation out in the marketplace, because if you're a real estate agent and you're working with a veteran, now you don't know if you're going to get paid or not, or you don't have the ability for them to pay you legally.
Yeah. So is that the reason why the VA decided to change this, because they need to be competitive with the other buyers?
Well, that's one great reason. And the VA typically doesn't act real fast. They don't typically move really fast through and navigate these different changes. But this one, they acted pretty quickly. I got to hand it to the VA. And they said, look, this is going to cause a problem for our veterans. Yeah. And if you know anything about Morgan Financial, we're veteran owned, veteran focused, and we're veteran run. And so working with the veterans are very important to us and our business. I mean, it's a good portion of our business. And, we saw in 2020 and 2021 COVID times that veterans kind of got a raw deal. Like a lot of people looked at that, the veteran loan as being more difficult. So they weren't even accepting VA offers. And as a company, we did lots of VA classes for real estate agents to educate them on, look, the appraisal isn't going to kill the deal. Look, this or this or this is not going to kill the deal. You've got to, remember the VA, the veterans, they served our country, and this is a benefit to them. So we've got to take care of them.
Yeah.
But in this instance, the VA saw this as problematic for the veterans, because if they weren't going to be able to pay a commission, then they might not have the same representation.
Yeah, for sure. A rule that I think originally was intended to protect the veteran and to be their benefit, but now seems like could be a hindrance moving forward. So I think it's a great change that they're making.
Yeah, I mean, it was meant to, like you said, protect the veteran from overpaying all these junk fees.
Right.
And that's what was the intent, but they realized it was going to cause some issues. Now, look, that the veteran doesn't necessarily always have to pay this commission, but if there's no seller paid commission, the buyer's agent rightfully wants to get paid for the work they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they have to have say, hey, listen, if we can't negotiate through the seller, are you willing to pay my commissions? And I think there's going to be some kind of disclosure and paperwork filled out by the broker or the agent and the borrower moving forward. And what this new VA rule does is it allows it in certain circumstance.
Right. Yeah, and I did want to ask a little bit about that. Maybe not in too much detail, but what are some of the?
It's not Miller time. This is
we are also
Mountain
not
Dew
sponsored.
time. Yeah.
But what are some of the rules or guidelines or regulations around this new rule being in place? Is it just probably going to be another form to sign, or is there anything specifically that,
Another form to sign with the VA? That's like jumbo shrimp. I mean, yes, of course. There's going to be more forms to sign. The VA loves their forms.
Yeah.
But I have some of the details here, and I just didn't want to forget anything, so I'm going to forgive me as I read off my list here. But there's 4 key conditions that the VA set out. First of all, this is a temporary rule.
Okay.
And it takes into place, I believe, August 10th of 2024. And the new rule with NAR, I can't remember the exact date it's supposed to take in effect, but there's going to be a lapse of a little bit of time period where they can't do this. They can't. That's not going to allow that fee. But this says area-specific application. The variance is relevant. So they're calling this a variance from the actual rule, because the actual rule is that the veteran buyer can't pay broker or agent fees. Okay.
Yep.
So the variance is relevant in areas where listing brokers can't set buyer-broker compensation through multiple listing, that's the MLS, or where the compensation isn't controlled by the listing broker. So the listing broker typically in our area controls the compensation. The seller signs a contract and says, I'm going to pay a 4, 5, or 6% commission. Then the listing agent says, well, I'm going to pay a co-broke of 1, 2, 3% towards the buyer's agent for bringing me a buyer. And that makes sense, right? Yeah. Look, I understand the pain, the work it takes to list a property, but there's also a lot of work involved in showing and selling the property.
Sure.
So you want to entice those buyer's agents to bring buyers, because that's the best chance you have of selling that property fast.
Absolutely.
In my opinion, that's my opinion. But so this says that in those areas where you can't advertise a co-broke, that the buyer, if the veteran buyer is allowed to pay that fee. Okay?
Gotcha.
So that next one is that says loan amount exclusion. Buyer broker charges cannot be included in the loan amount. All right. So you can't roll in these broker fees into the loan amount, even though technically right now, with the seller rolling it into the purchase price, it is kind of rolled into the loan amount.
Yeah.
But you can't just say, look, hey, agent, I'm going to pay you $5,000 to find me a house for me to buy. Instead of having a $200,000 loan, I want a $205,000 loan.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Okay. That's the second piece. They also have to consider now, as lenders, this is important for us, is that when we qualify people, now we've got to look at those buyer agent agreements, right? Yep. And how much liquid, assets do they have to fulfill that obligation to them? So if you wrote an agreement that says, look, I'm going to pay you I'm just using $5,000. That's an arbitrary amount just made up by me, but I'm going to pay you $5,000 to help me find a property as a commission. Here's an agreement. Well, now as a lender, we have to make sure that they have their closing costs, any down payment, and now this, because it's going to be added to the closing disclosure. Right. So the fourth piece of this that's important is that the disclosure requirements. Now, we're not going to require an invoice because invoices or whatever, but the closing disclosure, it has to be on the closing disclosure.
Okay.
So those are really the 4 main points of this one.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Just another upfront fee that we'll have to, verify you have funds for. Now, the last kind of question I have is, if you had any, what advice would you give to the veterans or their brokers about these changes, or if any, or how it's going to look moving forward?
Well, there's a couple of things we didn't touch on is negotiation. Now, the VA is urging, or not requiring, but saying to the veterans, hey, look, you can shop around and negotiate your fees. Now, I will tell everyone watching this that if you think a buyer's agent is only good for opening doors, you've missed the boat.
Right.
A good buyer's agent can really make this seemingly challenging thing of finding a home, especially in this environment. They know where to look. They know the properties. They've been in the properties. They know the areas. They know construction. There's a whole bunch of bevy of things that a good buyer's agent can really help out someone that only does this a couple times in their lifetime. Buyer's agents, they are doing this daily. They've shown, if they're experts and knowledgeable, they have a wealth of knowledge, and it's worth that fee, in my opinion. But so, the VA is urging people, or urge is maybe a too strong word, but they're suggesting that veterans shop and negotiate. But just remember, the lowest price isn't, you might end up paying a lot more for that property if you don't have someone that's on your side, knows how to negotiate,
right?
Knows the ins and outs of these properties.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a reason why they get paid those fees, and it's because a lot of times it saves the borrower a lot of money.
Yeah, cool.
And the other thing they're saying is that if the seller is still covering these fees, that's okay too. They're not saying the buyer, the veteran buyer has to pay these fees.
Yeah.
They're just saying now they can. And the seller can also pay them. And it's not considered a sales concession or sales concession or seller paid closing costs in this realm.
Okay. Yeah,
So
that's good to
important
know too, because that's another rule around the VA, right? You can only have so many seller concessions.
Yep. One important thing, the effective date again is August 10th, 2024. Don't forget that. If you have questions on this one, we put down below a link to that circular with the VA. So we'll put that down in the description, or a link to our website where we have more details on this, and our blog, as well as some thoughts from us. And there's some numbers I'm going to put on there with the VA and their hours of operation. So you can call the VA directly if you have questions on this. Or you can always call Morgan Financial for all your needs on VA loans, conventional loans, whatever. Even if we're not doing the loan, if you have questions, give us a ring, shoot a comment, question, like, share, do all the things you're supposed to do on social media. Any final words, Nick?
No, I think I'm good.
Cool. Well, thanks for watching today. I hope you got something out of this. Make sure to check out that blog we're going to have a link to down below. And we hope to see you next time. Thanks for coming on today. Bye-bye.